Yeah, Anil, what was your question, ma? Actually, I lost my connectivity. Incorrect summary problem deals with aggregate operators, ma. It deals with aggregate operators. So whenever in a particular transaction T1, you are trying to apply aggregate operators on some records. So whenever you're trying to apply aggregate operators on some records with respect to transaction T1, while another transaction is trying to update these records. So what will happen is the transaction which is trying to apply aggregate operators on these values would be updating it, would be applying that before the updates are being performed by the other transactions. So that would lead to a confusion. That is a concept. So see, one transaction is trying to do another thing which is not known to the other transactions which is trying to update. So it's an example I'm taking of an aggregate operator. I'm just working with aggregate operator on some values, and these values are being updated by some other transaction. That concept is known as your incorrect summary problem. Is it okay, Anil? Okay, now we'll be working with where we left in the previous class. So see, Emma, I told you we'll be working with testing for conflict serializability. So we are going to use something called as a precedence graph or a serialization graph for testing on conflict serializability. So we are using either a precedence graph or a serialization graph. Both mean the same. Is used commonly to test conflict serializability of a schedule. Okay. And what do I mean by a precedence graph is it is a directed graph V comma E, where V is the set of vertices, E is the set of edges. And whenever I'm talking about the edges with respect to a graph, directed graph, those edges would be directed. So I'm trying to create a directed graph which consists of the vertices as the names of the transactions, and I would be drawing an edge if at all there is a conflict. I would be drawing an edge if at all there is a conflict. Okay, so the schedule S is serializable if there is no cycle in the precedence graph. I hope you understand by what a cycle is. Discrete mathematics, you might be learning that, ma. So the schedule S is serializable if there is no cycle. There should not be any cycle. So cycle is something wherein if at all you start at a particular vertex, you are able to reach that particular vertex. Then I can say I form a cycle. Okay. Now, what we have to do in order to build this graph, and how do I know whether it is conflict serializable or not? We'll just work with an example over here. See, I'm taking a schedule S1. There's only one schedule S1 with 3 transactions, T1, T2, T3. I hope it's Clear to you, Amma? You can view this. S1 is a schedule. T1, T2, T3 are the transactions, right? So the operations are given over here. Read X, read Z, write Z, read Y, write Y, write X, write Z, and write X. So you know what you mean by a conflicting instructions. So whenever there is a conflicting instruction only, you have to draw a directed edge. So now, in order to build a precedence graph here, I'm just taking the vertices. So T1, T2, T3 are the names of the transactions. I'm working with them as the vertex name. So T1 is the first vertex, T2 is the second vertex, T3 is the third vertex. Okay. Now next, I have to go with the first operation. I'll be going with time-bound sense. I'll be going with a time-bound sense. Right. Rx is compared with all the other operations of the other transactions. Rx is compared with Rz first because there was an interleaving from T1 to T3. There's no interleaving from T1 to T2 over here. So Rx is compared with Rz. There's no contradiction or no conflict over here. Rx is compared with write Z, no conflict. Rx is compared with Ry, no conflict. Rx is compared with Wy, no conflict. Rx is compared with Wx. Okay, this particular thing is compared with this particular thing now. So, you know, both are conflicting instructions. Both are conflicting instructions. So whenever there is a conflicting instruction, you have to draw a directed edge from T1 to T3. Because the conflict is with respect to the transactions T1 and T3. Rx, write X. Okay, so T1 to T3, I am drawing a directed edge over here. I hope you can see this now. Right, now next, T2, I'm working with, there's no operation over here. Then I go with RZ. Read Z is compared with T2 and T1. Read Z, read Y, no issues. Read Z, write Y, no issues. Read Z and write Z. There is a problem here. Okay, there is a problem here. Read Z with write Z. Now, from T3 to T2, I have to draw a directed edge. So T3 to T2, I'm drawing a directed edge over here. Next, write Z. Write Z is compared with read Y, no issue. Write Z is compared with read Y, no issue. Write Z, write Y, no issues. Write Z, there is a problem. But already T3 to T2, there is a directed edge drawn. So I need not draw it again. Now again, what I have to do? Write Z is compared with write X, no issues. Here, next is read Y. Read Y compared with read Y, no problem. Read Y compared with write X, no problem. Read Y compared with write X, no issues. Now here I have to go with Ry and Wy. Ry, Wy. Fine. So Ry compared with Wy, there is an issue over here. I'm just marking red Amma in order you understand. Read Y compared with write Y is an issue, which is a conflicting instruction. So from where? T1 to T2. T1 to T2, there is a directed edge. I've drawn it over here. Next, anything else is there with Ry? Nothing. So then I'm going with Wx. Wx is Wy is compared with Wx, no issues. Wy is compared with Wx, no issues. Fine. Okay. Now here, next is Wx. Wx compared with Wz, no problem. Wx compared with Wx. There is an issue over here. So here, where is it coming from? T3 to T1. So T3 to T1. Now here, there is a cycle that is being formed. T1 to T3, T3 to T1. Hence, this is not a conflict serializable schedule. This is not a conflict serializable schedule. Because from T3, from T1, I can go to T3. From T3, I can go to T1. This is forming a cycle. T1, T3, T1. It's forming a cycle. Hence, Whatever the example schedule I've taken S1 is not conflict serializable. You have any questions, Ma, in this? How you are working with that? Do you have any questions? What about others? Clear? Okay, next month. See, sometimes the questions might come this way. The questions might come this way. So I'm giving you a schedule over here. S, this is my schedule. S is given as a sequence of instructions. S is given as a sequence of instructions. So R1X, R1Y, W2X, W1Y, and R2Y. Okay, so whenever there is 1 over here, R1, read 1, implies that this particular read instruction is with respect to transaction T1. And whenever there is 2 here, this particular instructions belong to T2. So now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to convert this particular scenario into this particular scenario over here. All of you can see this clearly. Okay. So T1, there are only 2 instructions because I've got R1 and R2 only. So what is the first instruction? You have to go in the sequence. R1X first, I'm writing it as RX. You need not mention the number because that particular instruction is with respect to transaction T1. That is the meaning. I hope it's clear, ma. Okay, R1X, R1Y, then I've got W2X, which is made as WX. Then I've got W1X, which would be with respect to what? Transaction T1. And then I've got R2Y, which is with respect to transaction T2. Now what I have to do? I have to draw 2 edges. Sorry, 2 vertices. I have to draw 2 vertices. Now what I'm trying to do? See here, what I'm trying to do over here is I'll just draw 2 edges. T1 followed by T2. Okay, now see, read of X is compared with write of X. Because I'm not comparing the instructions of the transaction itself, I'm comparing it with the other transactions. So T1's read of X is compared with T2's first operation. What is that? Write of X. So there is a conflict. So what I have to do is I have to draw a edge from T1 to T2, directed edge from T1 to T2. Next, RY, WX, no issues. RY, no issues. Then I'm working with WX, there is an issue. So this is from what? This is from T1 to T2. So again, what I'm trying to do? Again, there would be an edge from T1, T2 to T1. Okay. Now, is this forming a cycle? I'm able to move from T1 to T2 and again come back from T2 to T1. Hence, this is also not a conflict serializable schedule. Okay. Now, you can try this out, ma. S1, just try this out, whether it is serializable or not, using the precedence graph method. You use the precedence graph method and try to find out whether it is serializable or not. 7n, what is that, ma? You have put a slash over there. What do you mean by that? 7n. Okay, okay, fine, ma. How many vertices you get, ma, in the graph? How many vertices you are getting in the graph? 3. Okay. Are you able to do, ma? It is conflict serializable, not serializable. So both of you are giving different answers, ma. Check it properly. No cycle formed. Then what do you mean by that, ma? If no cycle is formed, what do you mean by that? I've told you clearly, if no cycle is formed, see, try to read this. Okay, if at all you're done with that, ma, try it this one. Try out this particular example. Try this example, all of you. The next one. Anil, you have to try it, Anil. I'm giving you the solution for everything. You are not doing anything now. So I want you people to do. I've just got 2 answers, Anil. I'm waiting for the others to do. Okay, ma, all of you at least try to do those 2 examples. All of you at least try to do the 2 questions and send the answers, ma. Okay. So it's very easy. You have to just convert the number of transactions into number of vertices. And if at all there is a conflicting instruction, you need to create an edge from a particular transaction to the other transaction. And if at all there is a cycle formed, you can say it is not conflict serializable, else you can say it is serializable. Okay. Now I'm going with the types of schedules. Okay. The first one is a recoverable schedule. The first one is a recoverable schedule. Okay. So schedules in which transactions commit only after all transaction whose changes they read commit are called as recoverable schedules. Schedules in which transactions commit only after all transactions whose changes they read commit are called recoverable schedules. So, in order to make it simple, Amma, if a transaction Ti is reading value okay, it's not Ti, it is Tj. If some transaction Tj is reading a value updated by a transaction Ti, then the commit of Tj must occur after the commit of Ti. Okay, so I think there was a problem with this particular thing in concurrency control, ma. Dirty read problem. If at all you remember the concept of dirty read, I'm talking about a dirty read. Okay. So what I mean by a recoverable schedule is if at all a transaction T2 is reading the value of a variable which was updated by a transaction T1. So T2 is trying to read the value of a variable which was updated by a transaction T1. Then the the schedule can be recoverable if and only if T1 commits before T2. T1 commits before T2, meaning the transaction T1 whose updated value T2 is reading should be committed before I actually commit T2. That is the concept now. Just try to see a small example over here, this particular example. Consider the following schedule involving two transactions. So it's T1, T2, read A, write A, write A, read A, and commit. I'm going with commit. Okay, I'll just modify this to read A in order to make it simple. And then I'll write it as read A. Sorry, write it. Okay. So see, read A. I'm trying to read the value of a variable A, update the value of A, and write the value of A. Then T2 is trying to read the value of A, which was updated by T1. Okay. Now it is performing a write operation. Okay, maybe. Or what I'll do is it will perform a write operation directly and then perform a read operation. It's up to you. Whatever way the logic of the problem would be. The logic of the problem would be, you can write it that way. So read A, update the value of A, and write the value of A. Then I'm performing write A, then I'm performing read A, whatever way. Then T1 is committing. After T1 commits, T2 is committing. So this is a recoverable schedule since T1 commits before T2. T1 commits before T2. That makes value read by T2 is correct. Whatever the value T2 has read is correct because whatever the changes made by T1 with respect to A is committed. With respect to A is committed. Hence, I can say that this is a recoverable schedule. Now, instead of that, if at all, I say, instead of commit coming over here, commit is coming here. Commit. And then what will happen? Maybe there are n number of steps in T1, and after that, a transaction fails. T1 fails. Then what will happen? It will not be a recoverable schedule since the commit of T1 is not coming before the commit of T2. Why? Because the value of A was read by T2, which was updated by an uncommitted transaction. That is the concept of your recoverable schedule. Okay. And the next one is cascading schedule. So these are different kinds of schedules. Just for your understanding, you have to know them. Cascading schedules. If in a schedule, the failure of one transaction causes several other transactions to be rolled back. So if at all I'm having n number of transactions in a schedule, the failure of one transaction might lead to the failure of all the other transactions or n number of transactions which are dependent on the first transaction. Then such a schedule is called as cascading schedule or cascading rollback or cascading abort. So any of the three things is being asked to you, Amma, you can write the same definition for that. So a single transaction leads to a single transaction failure leads to the rolling back of the dependent transactions. Then it leads to the concept of cascading rollback. Okay, so see here. What is a simple example? T1 is performing read on A and write on A. Read on A and write on A. Fine. So write on A means I'm updating the value of A with respect to transaction T1. Then I did not commit this one. Try to understand. I did not commit this. Now, T2 is reading the value of A, which was updated by T1. T3 is reading the value of A, which was updated by T2. T4 is reading the value of A, which was updated by T3. Okay. Now, after this particular step, the transaction T1 fails. Maybe there is a power failure, or maybe T1 is not getting the resources required. So what T1 is trying to do is, it is a failure. Now, since T1 is a failure, the value updated by T1 with respect to A would be lost. But that particular value is being used in T2. Hence, it is wrong information that is being passed to T2. Since this failure leads to the failure of T2, T2's failure leads to the failure of T3, T3's failure leads to the failure of T4. What will happen? So, due to the problem caused with T1, T2, T3, T4 have to be aborted or rolled back. That leads to the concept of cascading schedule. Okay, now see, transaction T2 depends on transaction T1, T3 depends on T2, T4 depends on T3. That is what I have told you here, clearly. So T3 is depending on the value written by T2, T4 is depending on the value that was written by T3. Hence, I'm just giving it in writing over here. Now, in this schedule, the failure of transaction T1 causes transaction T2 to roll back. Rollback of T2 causes T3 to roll back, and T3 rollback of T3 causes T4 to roll back. Such a rollback is called as cascading rollback. And there's something which is quite opposite to that of your cascading schedule, which is nothing but cascadeless schedule. There's something called as cascadeless schedule. If in a schedule, a transaction is not allowed to read a data item until the last transaction that has written that particular variable is committed or aborted, then such a schedule is called as a cascadeless schedule. Okay, now see here, in other words, I can make it simple. Cascadeless is something which allows only committed read operations. Now see an example over here. The same example I'm just trying to modify. So I'm performing a read operation, write operation, then I'm committing T1. Once I commit T1, I can say that T1 has successfully executed. T1 has successfully executed. Now, once T1 is executed, the changes T1 has made would be reflected in the database, right? So that particular value T2 is reading. So now T2 is reading the value updated by T1. It's writing the value. Then again, I'm performing a commit. And here also, T3 is reading the value updated by T2, writing again the value that was maybe updated or modified or deleted, whatever. And I'm just trying to commit over here. So since there are commits with respect to the corresponding read operations of other transactions, I can say that this is a cascadeless schedule. This is a cascadeless schedule. Okay, so this is about different types of schedules that are existing. Do you have any questions here, Ma? Any questions? All of you? CMO. Now we are talking about concurrency control. So how can I control the concurrent execution of transactions, right? So we are going with a set of protocols. Now, all of us know a database must provide a mechanism that will ensure that all possible schedules are either conflict or view serializable. That is what we have seen until now. Okay, so if at all a concurrent schedule has to be run properly, then it should be either conflict serializable or a view serializable. And we should see that most of the schedules are recoverable. I should be able to recover. If at all there is any loss of information, any possible system crash, all that stuff exists, I should be able to recover my original data. I should be able to recover my original data. Okay. So that is what I'm trying to do. Now, a policy in which one transaction can execute at a time generates serial schedules. All of you know this. So if at all there is an interleaving between transactions in a schedule, I say that it's a concurrent schedule. But what do I mean by a serial schedule is if at all transaction Ti is completing after Tj, after completing Tk, then I can say that it is a serialized version. Okay. Now, in the concurrency control, what we are trying to do is we are trying to develop concurrency control protocols that will assure serializability. The main goal is we have to attain serializability. And in order to attain serializability, what we have to do is we have to develop concurrency control protocols. And those protocols are usually of two types. We'll be learning these two types of protocols as of now. One is a lock-based protocol. The other one is a timestamp-based protocol. Lock-based protocol and timestamp-based protocol. Are you able to understand or you are facing any problems, Ma? Are you able to understand, all of you? Could you please respond? Amma, just try to understand, Ma. This is a bit of theory, but without that theory, you cannot understand the practical approaches, what is going inside. Okay. Now see, we have to go with the first one is log-based protocol. The second one is timestamp-based protocols. Okay. Now, talking about the first one, log-based protocols. We'll be talking about log-based protocols. So these are the different locking protocols, what we are going to learn now. These are the different kinds of locking protocols. The first one is simple locking. Second is two-phase locking protocols, strict two-phase locking protocols, rigorous two-phase locking protocols. We'll be learning about these four kinds: simple, two-phase, strict, and rigorous as of now. Okay, now what do you mean by a log-based protocol? Just try to understand. In this type of protocol, any transaction cannot read or write data until it acquires appropriate lock on it. So what I mean by this is, in a log-based protocol, I have to acquire a lock on a particular database item. I have to acquire a lock on a particular database item in order to read or modify that particular database item. Okay. Now, whenever I'm talking about locking a database item, the locking can be done in two ways. The locking can be done in two ways. The first one is a shared lock, and the second one is an exclusive lock. Okay. And the symbolic representation of shared is working with S, and exclusive locks is X. Okay. So whenever you acquire a shared lock on a particular database item, you can only perform read operation. Whenever you acquire a shared lock on a particular database item, you can only read that particular item. Hence, it is also known as a read-only lock. It is also known as a read-only lock. And clearly, I told you the data item can only be read by the transaction. Since it can be only read, it cannot be modified. Hence, the database item can be shared among different transactions at the same time. Okay. Now, next one, talking about exclusive lock. In exclusive lock, the data item can be both read as well as written. I can perform a write operation, I can perform a read operation whenever I acquire an exclusive lock on a particular database item A. Okay, this lock is exclusive, and in this lock, multiple transactions cannot modify the data simultaneously. Multiple transactions cannot modify the data simultaneously. Okay. Now, there's a compatibility matrix. Try to understand this. So only shared and shared is allowed with respect to two transactions. Shared and shared is allowed with respect to two transactions. So shared and shared is true. S and X is false. X and S is false. X and X is also false. So I have clearly told you, whenever I have a shared lock on a particular data item, other transactions can also hold a shared lock on that particular item. And if at all I have got an exclusive lock on a particular data item, other transactions cannot have an exclusive lock as well as a shared lock on that particular data item. That is a concept now. Okay. Now, just what we usually do is, in the previous case, we were directly working without any locking mechanisms. Now here what we try to do is we have to apply locking mechanism in order to work with database items. Now see, simple locking. What we try to do is, see here. The simple locking mechanism is quite simple. What I have to do is, I have to lock the item before I actually want to access the data item. Okay. Now, usually, previously, how I was working when I was writing a transaction would be T1. Okay. Wait a minute. So, read of S. This was what I was trying to do in the previous case. S is equal to S plus 100. Write of S. And then maybe I'll just go with a commit. This is what I was doing in the previous case. If at all you remember, my transaction was just looking like this. I used to take A and B as the database item. Now I've just taken something called as S. I've just taken something called as S over here. Okay. Now, In order to make this into a locking protocol, what I have to do here is T1. Before I actually read a database item, I have to lock -s stands for shared, and maybe the database item is A over here. Okay, so this is the first step. Since maybe I want to perform a read operation, I'm just going with this. And after this, what I can do is I can read A. And if at all I say A is equal to A plus 10, this would give me an error. This would give me an error. So this particular statement here did not give me anything because I was just working without the concepts of lock over there. I was just working without the concept of locks over there. But here what I've done is I'm applying a shared lock, which is exclusively a read-only lock. Then I can perform only read operations. I cannot perform any write operations over here. Okay. Now, in order to write what I have to do, I have to have an exclusive lock over here. Then I can say write of A. And after this, I can say commit. So this is the modification, what I need to do if at all I want to apply a simple locking technique. This is a simple locking technique. Is it clear, all of you? So what is locking? What are different kinds of locks? And how do I acquire a lock? Okay, now see. This is an example of a simple locking technique wherein T1 transfers 100 from A to B and T2 displays the result of A plus B. Okay. T1 transfers 100 from A to B and T2 displays A plus B. So the above scenario, this particular scenario is a serialized version. What I'm trying to do is I will try to execute T1 first and then I'll try to execute T2. Okay, so T1 followed by T2. So T1 is executed first. Now, what I'm trying to do, T1 is transferring rupees 100 from A to B, meaning there is a possible update operation. There is a possible update operation. All of you can see that. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to lock the variables first. Lock the variables first. So T1, transaction T1, these are the steps. Lock X of A. So A is the database item. X symbolizes exclusive lock. Then I can perform both read and write operations if at all I have an exclusive lock. So lock X of A, read the value of A is equal to A minus 100, write A. Okay. And after that, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to unlock A so that some other transactions can use the value of A. Okay, as of now, in simple locking, that is what I'm trying to do, Amma. In simple locking, I'm just trying to unlock A. After that, lock exclusive B, read the value of B. B is equal to B plus 100, write B, then unlock B. So now what I have done in this is, I'm just trying to transfer 100 from account A to account B. Now transaction T2, it's just interested in reading the value of A, B, and just work with adding A plus B. Just work with adding A plus B. Okay. I'm just trying to remove this one. I'm not trying to unlock this. Now see, lock shade of A, read of A, lock S of B, read of B, and I'll remove this. Now here what I'm trying to do is display A plus B. Lock S of A, read of A, lock S of B, read of B, display A plus B. If at all you want to unlock the variables, unlock. If at all you do not unlock, it will lead to the concept of deadlock. All of you know what a deadlock is. So lock shade of A, read of A, lock shade of B, read of B, display A plus B. So my first transaction transfers 100 using the simple locking technique, and the second transaction display the value of A plus B after T1 has been successfully executed. Okay, so this is the concept of your simple locking technique. Okay, now we will go with the second scenario, which is nothing but simple two-phase locking protocol. So different types of locking protocols. The first one I told you about, simple locking protocol, and this is simple two-phase locking protocol. So this usually consists of two phases. This simple two-phase locking consists of two phases. The first one is a growing phase, and the second one is a shrinking phase. Okay, the first one is a growing phase, wherein only locks are obtained and no locks would be released. So in growing phase, you are just trying to acquire the locks. In growing phase, you are just trying to acquire the locks, and you are not releasing any of the locks. And the next one is a shrinking phase, wherein you are only releasing the locks. Only locks will be released and no new locks will be taken. So these are the two phases. And once you feel that you have acquired all the locks on the database item, you reach a point which is called as a lock point. So see here, see the diagram. Growing phases, you're just trying to acquire the locks on the database items. You're just trying to acquire the locks on the database items. And here you feel that no more locks are required. No more locks are required. Then you reach a lock point. And once you reach a lock point, you can start releasing the locks. You're just releasing the locks. So this is called as a shrinking phase. This is growing phase. This is lock point. This is shrinking phase. Okay. Now just look at the small example. Transaction T1, T2, T3. Okay. T1, T2, T3. So here I have acquired locks and I feel that T1 is satisfied with what? Acquiring of locks. Hence it reaches a lock point. This is the concept of lock point. Now what T2 is trying to do is T2 is just trying to acquire locks until this particular point. And here this is the lock point. Then T3 is just working with acquiring locks. And once it reaches the acquiring of locks, you reach the lock point. Sometimes they might ask you, what do you mean by a lock point? In simple two-phase locking protocol, what do you mean by a lock point? There might be a question. So lock point is the point wherein all the all the database items that have been required by a particular transaction for its execution have been locked. Or once I reach the maximum growing phase, wherein no more locks have to be logged. No more data items have to be logged. Then I say I have reached the lock point. So there are disadvantages of using simple two-phase locking protocols. Simple two-phase locking protocols, there are certain disadvantages. What are the disadvantages? The first one is deadlocks. The second one is unnecessary wait due to early lock and cascading rollback. I have just explained you what is a cascading rollback, and two-phase locking protocol leads you to the concept of cascading rollback. Okay, see, unnecessary wait due to early lock. Now, there are two transactions. This is an example of simple two-phase locking protocol. This is an example of simple two-phase locking protocol. So see what I'm trying to do. Lock X on A, read the value of A, write the value of A. What I'm trying to do is, I'm just trying to work with database item A. After this, what I'm trying to do, read A, write A, and lock X of B. And after that, there is much processing. Now, T2 is trying to acquire a shared lock on A. A shared lock on A. But since exclusive lock has been already allocated on A with respect to transaction T1, T2 has to wait until this particular exclusive lock has been released by T1, or else this would be waiting for T1 to release the lock on A. So this is the problem, one of the problem. Now, deadlock. The second one is deadlock. What is the concept of deadlock? Just try to understand. Here, just try to see this. Okay, so T1, lock exclusive on B, lock exclusive on B, read the value of B, write the value of B. I've just made it into symbolism, lock XB. So I'm trying to acquire an exclusive lock on B, then read the value of B, write the value of B. Now here what I'm trying to do is, I just want to read the value of A. So shared lock on A has been acquired over here. Read the value of A, and it requires to work with database item B. It requires to work with database item B. And after that, T1 requires to work with database item A. Now what is happening? T1 is waiting for T2 to release lock on A, and T2 is waiting for what? T1 to release lock on B. Hence, it causes the problem of deadlock. 1 minute, ma. Clear, ma? Is it clear? The concept of deadlock? T1 is waiting for T2. T2 is waiting for T1 in order to release the locks on the database items that are required by T1 and T2, which leads to the concept of a deadlock. So this is one more problem caused by your what? Two-phase locking protocol. Okay, now cascading rollback. So try to understand this and try to assume what is cascading rollback over here. Yes, ma. Did you get what is the problem in the example given to you, cascading rollback? All of you in the class or no? So you are having a problem with dirty read. Are you having a problem with dirty read, ma? See here, exclusive lock on A, read of A, update of A, unlock A. So I haven't committed this particular transaction and I'm trying to read the value of A, which was updated by T1. Hence, it leads to the problem of your write read problem as told by Anil. So that is cascading rollback with respect to your simple two-phase locking protocol. So this is about your concurrency control protocol with respect to locking. Ma. I've just covered what do you mean by what? Locking? What are the different kinds of locks? What are different kinds of locks? And what are different kinds of locks? Then compatibility matrix with respect to the two locks, shared and exclusive. Then we have learned about simple locking mechanism. The next one was simple two-phase locking protocol. Just go through this for 2 minutes, ma. And we have also covered the precedence graph method in today's class, ma. Just go through this for 2 minutes. You have any issues, you can ask, ma. I hope it's clear, Ma. You have any questions? Two-phase locking protocol. Conservative two-phase locking protocol. So this is a bit harsher version of the simple two-phase locking protocol, Ma. Okay, you are just trying to increase the complexity. That's it, nothing else. So what does conservative two-phase locking protocol say is lock all the database items that are actually required by a particular transaction for its execution. So you have to lock all the database items that are actually required for the execution of a particular transaction before actually the transaction starts. Okay, so maybe a transaction T1 requires database items ABCD for its execution. So it requires ABCD for its execution. And once it knows that I require ABCD data items, I request locks on all those particular database items. I request for locks on all those database items. So procuring locks on all the database items required by a particular transaction is practically impossible at the beginning. So the implementation of this kind of protocol is a bit difficult. That is the reason I've written over there. Practical implementation is difficult, but the advantage would be you cannot have a situation wherein deadlock is seen because all the database items have been logged here. All the database items have been logged here. So there's no possibility of a deadlock situation if at all I am given the locks on ABCD. But still, I can have the concept of cascading rollback. There's a possibility. So this is about your conservative two-phase locking protocol. This is about your conservative two-phase locking protocol. Now in the next class, we'll be working with a more stricter version of your two-phase locking protocol. Any questions in today's class, Ma? Any questions in today's class?